Hey, I'm Tyler, your host, and this is A Good Problem to Have. Today we're going to be talking about the privilege of being able to make less than optimal financial decisions for the sake of our preferences and our mental health. The two scenarios I'm thinking of that made me think to talk about this with you, they both have to do with student loans. But the decision that we're going to talk about in each case comes from a different place and has a different impact. What I want to be able to show you all is that sometimes you have choices where both can be okay. They can the results, the outcome will be all right. One might statistically be less optimal, but maybe it feels better. And if you've counted the cost and looked at like what the outcomes would be in either case, then it really comes down to what is the right decision to you. And that's a real privilege to be in a financial position where you can say, hey, I'm not going to make as much money doing this, or I'm going to lose out on some investment performance opportunity by making this decision. And that's all right. I'm all right with it. That's a good place to be. And so the first scenario is like, imagine you're someone who is not in medical training anymore. You've gotten out and you're in you're a dual physician income household, and you're accumulating savings, and you've got $400,000 in cash that has accumulated. And one of you is going for public service loan forgiveness, and you have like $250,000 in debt. And the other person is not going for public service loan forgiveness, and they have about $90,000 in student debt. Now, the interest rate on the student loans, that has a bearing on the decision whether you should, whether or not you could refinance, whether or not you would consider investing funds instead of paying it off. And so in this situation, the interest rate is about 5.1%. And I had a conversation that's extremely similar to this scenario that I just laid out to you with a couple that I work with. And they were trying to decide, like, well, we have this cash and we know that we should be doing something with it. Right now, it's sitting in a high yield savings account. Thankfully, it's not just in like a regular 0.01% earning checking account. So it is earning something, but they know that they should do something else with a significant amount of it aside from what will be their emergency fund. And so we were talking about whether or not to just pay the $90,000 loan off outright, or whether we should invest as much as possible and put the loan on a schedule of payments so that it will be paid off in 5 years or 4 years or 3 years or something like that. And we worked out the math, and we could see that historically and statistically speaking, there is good reason to think about investing as much as possible and paying the loan gradually over the course of the next few years in order to maximize and optimize investment opportunity potential. Of course, that's not guaranteed. And of course, I told them that, and I'm telling you that no investment performance is ever guaranteed. And so it is a risk, of course, to do that. But that's, investing is it's a decision to take on that risk that's based on something. It's based on fundamentals that do exist. And that's why we invest. We're also optimistic for the future. In any event, I showed them that by investing as much as possible and putting the loan on a schedule of payments, that would theoretically result in a better outcome than if they were to take $90,000 of the cash that they have and just wipe out the loan. However, I also showed them that by paying off the loan right now, it would accomplish two things. One, you would avoid the ongoing interest expense of that loan. 5.1% isn't huge, but it's not nothing either. And if you work out the schedule, or not the schedule, if you work out the numbers where you ascertain, well, what if I were to earn that 5.1%? Like, what would that result in for me if I were to earn that in like a bond investment? Because that's effectively what it is when you have a loan. You're on the flip side of a bond. Someone else owns the rights to being paid back your debt plus interest, and the interest that they earn is income for them. And if you were to not have that debt anymore, you would be avoiding that 5.1% interest expense. And that's on an after-tax basis, right? Now, if we were to apply a tax rate to that, you're looking at a real like pre-tax investment performance return of over 6%. So it's even more so if you're trying to compare or contrast investing those funds versus just paying off the debt, you do have to evaluate that 5.1% within the lens or within the frame of the saved expense and what that means to you on a pre-tax basis. Because whenever we invest in a taxable account, we're talking about pre-tax profit potential, and we have to evaluate what it would actually result in on an after-tax basis, because that's what you actually get. And so I showed them that there is a return. It's like a reverse bond is like what I say, because you avoid paying the expense. So it's kind of like the same thing as if you did earn a bond that was paying over 6%. And not only is that the case, but it's also guaranteed. This is guaranteed because if you have the cash and you get rid of debt, you are guaranteed to not have to pay the interest expense on that loan anymore because you've paid it off. And that is called risk-free. And risk-free profit or risk-free return is quite valuable because you don't have to account for any variability in whether or not you can achieve it. You can in this scenario. So there's a good deal of value there. But there's also the second reason, and that is that we showed them through our planning process, cash flow projections over many years, that this decision is not going to move the needle significantly in either direction. Yes, like if things work out and you invest everything and the investment performance goes as we think that it would, then yes, your net worth would be higher by not just wiping out the debt and investing as much as possible and making payments on a schedule. However, if you pay off the debt instead, the result, the outcome of this family's particular financial projections are extremely good anyway. So we're starting to split hairs here. And so I asked them, I said, what would feel like progress? And they said, oh, it'd be so great to just get rid of the debt. It would feel like we really did something big. And I'm like, let's do that. You can do that. It's not a foolish decision by any means. It's very intelligent to take that step. And part of financial success, part of financial planning success is taking steps that feel like you're moving in the right direction. Because a lot of stuff about money, even when things are going well, are draining. And if you can take a major step that feels good and it's relatively simple, man, that's awesome. It's a great thing to capture. The second example I wanted to share with you is also about paying off student debt, but it's a much larger sum, over $200,000. And this is a couple wherein the couple, they are, I think what many of you will call non-traditional. So they didn't just do the thing like where it's like they're both, straight out of undergrad, straight to, medical school, and actually one spouse is not in medicine at all. But the one spouse who is, she's graduating medical school this coming season, this coming year, and hoping to match in anesthesiology. And they recognize that debt could be paid off. A debt could be paid off by her future attending income. But here is a unique situation, and this is a huge, huge privilege or a good problem to have. They own investments that have happened to perform extremely well over the past several years, and they've got about $1.5 million in investments. And their question to me was, should we just pay this off? I mean, maybe she'll go for PSLF and she'd have most of the loans forgiven. Or I don't know about most, but like half seems reasonable based on what we know now. And also, by not withdrawing the funds, they allow those funds to continue to be invested and have the potential to keep growing. And so they were wondering, like, what should we do? What's the right move here? And it's a very similar series of steps that I did, calculated like, well, what would be the result if you were to not pay off the loans? And of course, these are all unsubsidized graduate loans, right? So they're all earning interest. And these days for med students, we're talking 7, 8, maybe 9% interest. And so you got to account for that. Of course, there is a potential that they could go for public service loan forgiveness, and there's certainly that potential in anesthesiology. There's also a lot of people in anesthesiology that work as subcontractors. They end up wanting to do it that way. And of course, this person, she hasn't even begun intern year. So it's hard to say what area of that specialty she would actually get into. And so, you have those uncertainties, you have the interest accrual continuing, and then you also have the fact that investments long term, I'm very optimistic, but in the short term, things can fluctuate. And what if the particular investments, and here's another thing, I'm not going to tell you the name of the stock, but it is almost exclusively focused in one company. So it's very concentrated. And so this one company, it's done very well, but could it tank? Absolutely. So I told them, I said, you're in a position right now where you could just, you know what? We got $1.5 million. Now we got 1.3 invested and no student debt. Definitely worth considering. And, of course, optimally speaking, this stock and other investments could perform even better than the 7, 8, 9%, even on a pre-tax reverse bond basis. So, there's some good stuff to look at here. It was not an easy answer, but the investments could perform better than that, right? And the outcome could be even better. And we're not talking about $90,000 like we were in the first scenario. We're talking about over $200,000 of money that is no longer being invested and growing. It is eliminating debt, eliminating interest expense. But optimally, the option of not paying off the loans, especially if we're thinking about PSLF, not paying off the loans and just keeping the money invested, is the more pragmatic, financially superior choice. But that doesn't make it the best decision. And so I had that, and I had this thought process, and what I conveyed to them and what I'll tell you is that you could go either way. But if you're asking my opinion on what I would do if I was in that scenario, I would pay it off. There is such a value in having less weight on you, less stress on your mind when it comes to debt. The decision-making process, thinking time, and especially as you're going into intern year and beyond, there's a lot of pressure as it is to be able to go through that experience without student debt. What a great problem. What a great problem. So that was my opinion anyway. And I'm not sure what they'll end up doing. Actually, as I'm talking to you right now, I don't know what they're going to do. um, I, but in either case, they would be fine financially speaking. But I look at these as opportunities to open windows wider, windows of less money stress, which is rare these days. And if you can create those, if you can widen those windows, what a cool thing. What a valuable thing. So, just had 2 examples I wanted to share with you today about when it's wise to make the less optimal decision. See you next time.